who's spoken, and for my honourable friends, the Honourable Member for West Ham, Bassett Law and Ilford North, who are also here in support of the bill and who have done tremendous work in this area over the years themselves. And can I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Chipping Barnett for bringing this important bill to the committee today, and I'm very happy to confirm that she has the full support of Her Majesty's loyal opposition for her bill. She once again spoke, I thought, with great force and authority on this issue, and in doing so she not only gives great service to the British Jewish community and the Jewish community throughout the world, but to humanity as a whole, because her bill says that the sun should never set on justice and on righteousness, and that is a principle which, in its application here to the uniquely horrifying episode that was the Holocaust, nevertheless carries universal force in its message of human redemption. I was privileged some years ago to travel with a group of MPs and prominent figures and sixth formers to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was one of many such visits organised by the Holocaust Educational Trust, led by its inspirational Chief Executive, Karen Pollock, and supported by the government at the time. And I'm glad to say it is still a scheme that exists to this day. And no one who has undertaken this visit could not help but be horrified by the capacity for human depravity exemplified in the industrialisation of death represented by the Birkenau death camp, or not be moved to renew their pledge to fight anti-Semitism and to oppose the politics of racism and hatred. And this bill is a small example of a practical manifestation of the fulfilment of that duty, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for piloting it thus far. I also want to pay tribute to the work done, as she did, on this issue by Andrew Dismore, the former Member of Parliament for Hendon and London Assembly member, who was rightly praised also by my Right Honourable friend, the Shadow Culture Secretary, at second reading of this bill. He worked tirelessly, Sir David, to get the original Act, which this bill seeks to extend, through the House in 2009, even sleeping on the floor of the Public Bill Office overnight, as one used to have to make sure that he had a high enough place in the ballot to get it heard. And he also introduced the private member's bill that established Holocaust Memorial Day in 2001. And I recently attended, as I know other honourable members have attended their own events, I recently attended the Welsh National Holocaust Day Memorial event in Cardiff City Hall, where we heard from our First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, and also from Renate Collins, who was torn from home, as was the theme, as my honourable friend said, when she was evacuated from Prague in 1939 as a child and came to live in Wales, where she still lives. The Holocaust was one of the worst events, as we know, Sir David, in human history, with millions of lives extinguished and millions more changed forever. The fact that it happened on our continent, in the heart of Western civilization, is a reminder of why we must be constantly vigilant against anti-Semitism and all forms of racism, and remember that genocide starts in casual prejudice, in the dehumanization of others who are deemed different by virtue of their religion or their ethnicity or their lifestyle or their sexuality. It is the fact that such horror could be perpetrated not just by those directly involved, but by the indifference of others in the general population, that should make us all reflect on what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil and our own roles in actively preventing it from taking root. So let us pay thanks to the important work of all the organisations that make sure the world will never forget. This bill addresses an extremely important subject, the return of cultural objects looted by the Nazis. During the Nazi reign of terror, millions of precious cultural objects were stolen from the Jewish community. Some have been recovered, but many thousands remain missing. Around 100,000 objects, it's been estimated, stolen by the Nazis are still missing today. So we should do everything we can to reunite cultural objects that surface with their rightful owners. More than 70 years on now from the end of World War II, there are still families who have not been reunited with precious artefacts that rightly belong to them. And as many survivors of the Holocaust reach the sunsets of their lives, it's vital that their descendants have confidence that this Parliament are committed to ensuring that the sun does not set on their ability to recover what is rightfully theirs. The bill, as we've heard, Sir David, repeals the sunset clause in the Act brought in by the 2009 Act, which gave our national museums and galleries the power to return these special cultural objects on the recommendation of the Spoliation Advisory Panel. And since 2023 cultural objects taken by the Nazis have been returned to their rightful owners, including a John Constable painting that was stolen by the Nazis after the invasion of Budapest, which was returned by the Tate in 2015. We must ensure that the panel can continue its vital work. It has carried out its work fairly and delivered justice to the families of those whose precious possessions were stolen. It works in cooperation with our national museums and galleries, the directors of whom I addressed at their council meeting at the Science Museum yesterday. They support the panel's work and are in agreement on the urgency and necessity of returning stolen objects to their owners. So this is a carefully targeted and specific piece of legislation that works well. It is particularly important for those whose stolen possessions have sadly still not been found, and also for those who may not even know about this process and may not even harbour a hope of getting back what their families once treasured. It can still give hope to those families too. Now, when I undertook that visit with the Holocaust Education Trust over a decade ago, Sir David, the spectre of anti-Semitism might have seemed to some to have been on the wane, but it is clearly on the rise again, with anti-Semitic hate crimes, as my honourable friend mentioned, hitting a record number in 2018. That is something that should anger us all, and we must do everything in our power to face it down, including by supporting our honourable colleagues on both sides of the House who've been the subject of death threats, the subject of racist abuse, the subject of misogynistic abuse, and the subject of bullying and anti-Semitism. And I would like to thank the honourable member once again for Chipping Barnett for all the work she's done on this vital bill, which delivers a small amount of justice to those who've suffered so greatly. So David, in closing, I had the pleasure of watching the Liverpool Everyman Theatre production of the beautiful musical Fiddler on the Roof in 2017, including, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, my brother Patrick in the starring role of Tevye. And colleagues will know it tells the story of a Jewish family in Russia forced from their home by the pogroms that preceded or were the precursor to the ultimate obscenity that was the Nazi Holocaust. And in thinking about this bill and what it seeks to do, the words of one song which my brother sang in that production came to my mind. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. And as the years fly ever more swiftly by, let us hope that the Right Honourable Lady's bill, in removing the sunset clause, may bring a small ray of happiness to some victims' families as they contemplate through tears the horror that befell their relatives because good people did too little, too late to stand up to evil. Yeah.